The Eternal Kingdom, a chronicle of ancient Egypt. For over 3,000 years, ancient Egypt rose as the world's longest-lasting empire, taming the mighty Nile, raising pyramids that touched the sky, and ruling as living gods. Yet even this seemingly eternal civilization could not escape the slow, relentless forces of nature, ambition, and time that finally brought it crashing down forever. The sun rises over a land that has stood for 3,000 years. The pyramids pierce the horizon like monuments to infinity itself. The Nile flows as it always has, bringing life to the desert, sustaining millions. Temples stretch toward the heavens, their walls covered in hieroglyphs, proclaiming the eternal nature of the pharaohs, the divine kings who bridge the mortal world and the realm of the gods. This is Egypt at its zenith, a civilization so ancient that even the Romans will one day call it old, a kingdom so enduring that it will outlast empires that haven't yet been imagined. But nothing lasts forever, not even eternity. The priests perform their rituals as they have for millennia. The scribes record the deeds of pharaohs in sacred script. The farmers work the black soil of the Nile's gift as their ancestors did before them, and their ancestors before them. But something is different now. The empire is hollow. Foreign powers circle like vultures. The throne passes between weak hands and foreign conquerors. The old certainties are crumbling. Soon, very soon, a Roman general will stand in Alexandria and Egypt. The Eternal Kingdom will become a province. The age of the pharaohs will end not with thunder, but with the quiet closing of a tomb door. 3,000 years of continuous civilization about to become memory. But how did it come to this? How does eternity end? To understand the fall, we must return to the beginning, to a time before Egypt was Egypt, before the pyramids, before the pharaohs, before the very concept of kingdom and empire took form in the human mind. We must go back to the desert, to the river, to the first people who looked at the fertile strip of land along the Nile and saw not just survival, but possibility. 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was not the vast desert it is today. Rain fell. Grasslands stretched where now only sand exists. Hunter-gatherers roamed freely, following herds gathering what the land provided. But the climate was changing. The rains were failing. The grasslands were dying. The people were being pushed toward the one constant in this transforming world, the Nile River, a ribbon of life cutting through increasingly hostile terrain. The Nile was different from other rivers. It flooded predictably, reliably, transforming the landscape each year with a precision that seemed almost divine. While other ancient peoples had to pray for rain and hope for the best, the people gathering along the Nile could depend on the annual inundation with almost complete certainty. This predictability changed everything. It allowed planning. It rewarded patience. It made agriculture not just possible, but extraordinarily productive. The floodwaters would arrive each summer, deposited rich black silt across the land, then recede, leaving behind soil so fertile that seeds almost seemed to plant themselves. The Egyptians would later call their land Kemet, the Black Land, referring to this precious dark soil that made life possible. Beyond the narrow strip watered by the Nile lay the Red Land, the desert, lifeless and hostile, a barrier that would protect Egypt even as it isolated it. By 6,000 years ago, villages were forming along the river. These weren't temporary camps, but permanent settlements. Mud brick homes, storage facilities for grain, the beginnings of social hierarchy. Some people were better at organizing labor. Others accumulated more resources. Inequality emerged, as it always does when surplus exists. With surplus came specialization. Not everyone needed to farm. Some could focus on crafts, on trade, on warfare, on the emerging rituals that would become the foundation of Egyptian religion. The villages became towns. The towns began to cluster into larger political units. Upper Egypt, the southern region where the Nile flowed through a narrow valley between desert cliffs. Lower Egypt, the northern delta, where the river spread into multiple channels before reaching the sea. Two lands, developing separately, with their own local rulers, their own gods, their own identities. Competition between them was inevitable. Violence was common. Warfare was becoming organized. Leaders were becoming kings. Around 5,000 years ago, the pace of the change accelerated. Hieroglyphic writing was emerging, developing from simple pictograms into a complex system capable of expressing abstract thought. Monumental architecture was beginning, not yet the pyramids, but impressive structures nonetheless. Trade networks were expanding, bringing exotic materials from distant lands. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, gold from Nubia. Egypt was connecting to the wider world even as it remained fundamentally shaped by its unique geography. Then came unification. The historical details are murky, lost in the mists of time and later mythology, but the result was clear. Around 3,100 years before the Common Era, Upper Egypt conquered Lower Egypt. A king named Narmer, or perhaps Menes, the historical record conflates them, united the two lands under a single crown. The Narmer palette, a ceremonial stone tablet, shows this king wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt on one side and the red crown of Lower Egypt on the other, smiting his enemies, establishing order from chaos. This wasn't just conquest. This was the creation of the world's first nation-state, a unified kingdom stretching hundreds of miles along the Nile, with a centralized administration, a divine king, an ideology that would prove remarkably durable. The early dynastic period established the patterns that would define Egypt for the next 3 millennia. The king was not just a political leader, but a god incarnate, the earthly embodiment of Horus, the falcon deity responsible for maintaining Ma'at, cosmic order and justice. When the king died, he became Osiris, lord of the underworld, and the new king became Horus. This divine kingship justified absolute power while simultaneously constraining it with religious obligation. The pharaoh wasn't free to do as he pleased. He had cosmic responsibilities. He had to maintain Ma'at. He had to ensure the Nile flooded. He had to keep chaos at bay. Memphis was established as the capital, strategically located at the junction between Upper and Lower Egypt, a deliberate choice that symbolized unity. From Memphis, the early pharaohs organized the kingdom, dividing it into administrative districts called nomes, each governed by a nomarch, a local official responsible to the king. They developed a sophisticated bureaucracy of scribes who recorded everything: grain harvests, tax collections, royal decrees, all written in hieroglyphs on papyrus, a writing material made from reeds that grew abundantly in the Nile marshes. The kings of the early dynastic period were buried in elaborate tombs at Abydos and Saqqara. These weren't yet pyramids, but mastabas, rectangular structures with sloping sides containing chambers for the king's body and the goods he would need in the afterlife. The Egyptians had developed a complex belief in the afterlife that would become central to their civilization. Death was not an end, but a transition. The body had to be preserved. The Ka, the life force, had to be sustained with offerings. The Ba, the personality, had to be able to travel between the tomb and the land of the living. These beliefs would drive the incredible investment in funerary architecture that defined Egyptian culture. Then came the Old Kingdom, the age of pyramids, the period when Egyptian civilization reached a creative peak that would never quite be matched again. The Third Dynasty began around 2,660 years before the Common Era, and with it came Djoser, a pharaoh remembered primarily for one achievement. His architect, Imhotep, a commoner elevated to legend, designed something revolutionary. At Saqqara, Imhotep constructed a tomb unlike anything seen before. He stacked mastabas on top of each other, each level smaller than the one below, creating a step pyramid. The step pyramid of Djoser rose in 6 stages to a height of over 200 feet, dominating the landscape, visible for miles across the desert. It was surrounded by a massive complex of courtyards, temples, and ceremonial buildings, all enclosed by a wall. This was more than a tomb. This was a statement about the power and permanence of kingship. Imhotep's innovation sparked an architectural revolution. Subsequent pharaohs wanted their own pyramids, each trying to outdo their predecessors. The 4th dynasty, beginning around 2,600 years before the Common Era, saw this competition reach its apex. Pharaoh Sneferu, the dynasty's founder, built not one but multiple pyramids as he experimented with the form. The bent pyramid at Dashur has a distinctive profile where the angle of the sides changes partway up, likely because the original angle proved structurally unstable. Undeterred, Sneferu built another pyramid nearby, the Red Pyramid, which succeeded in achieving smooth sides from base to apex. This was the first true pyramid. But Sneferu's son would eclipse even these achievements. Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, decided to build the largest, most precise, most ambitious structure ever attempted by human hands.